Oh, right, we're good. We're on. We're on early. Oh, that's. All right, guys. We kind of made a bit of a glitch, and we're on a bit early, so we're ready. I think we're going to take this from here. Yeah, caught me off guard a small bit there. Right, so welcome back. I'm excited. We have a great presentation. I've seen it. I'm absolutely thrilled at what we're going to be seeing. And when I spoke with the NRC originally, I asked them, I gave them a bunch of things that I'd like to have spoken about, but I think these two in particular, the zero step and the transitional fouling, is something I think that we all need to get better at from a coaching perspective and from a refereeing perspective, and then obviously leading to the communication on the floor about it. So I think these are two very relevant topics in terms of where we've come from, in terms of where FIBA have made a few adjustments the last couple of years. I think it's a good idea just to kind of nail things down. And then we have 2 out of our 3 FIBA officials with Magic, and I still can't pronounce it. I think is it Nazimek and Emma Perry.
Perfect. Well.
Yeah, so I think we're nearly there. And I think I've got 2 Europeans with Magic already as well. So I think his experience there, as you can see in their profiles, they have extensive experience at the European level, both at the FIBA competitions and national levels and national cups. So I'm very excited to see what they're going to present. I believe Emma is going to talk first, and she's going to speak on the zero step, and I believe Magic is going to speak on the transition fouling. And the clips that they've used are very appropriate. And then I think the last section is going to be a collective effort in terms of core communication. What I would encourage you to do, what I would encourage you to do is post your questions in the question section. We won't accept anything where it's very personal, and we are just going to make this strictly a learning environment for us all. And as I said, I think we've got 2 very experienced officials that can handle that. And what we will do is, after each section, we take some questions, and you will see the question slide come up after each one. I'm very excited. This is the one I've been looking forward to, and not for the reason that people might expect, but I think it's just something that, as coaches, I think it's something that we need to get clarified. And I have to say, I've had really positive discussions with Paul Dempsey, Magic and Emma the last couple of days, and we've really kind of spoke at length the last couple of days to make sure that this works for both parties. So I think we're ready to go. And Emma, are you sharing your screen, or is Magic sharing his one?
You can share Magic's one there, because I think mine is kind of frozen on my end, but you can share it with Magic's there.
So what we'll do is we share it with Magic, and then we go from there. So are you good, Magic?
Yeah, just give me 1 second. And I just want to see. Can you see my screen now, guys?
Yeah, it's perfect.
I can indeed, yeah.
I can see it now. Okay, perfect. And all good now, yeah? Correct?
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect.
Well, I'll pass over to you guys.
Okay, so first of all,
I'm going to take off screen and pass over to you guys.
Okay, well, firstly, I'd like to thank Paul for this opportunity. I believe that the sessions that have gone on before us have been very successful. I've logged into 1 or 2 of them myself and found them very beneficial from a refereeing point of view to hear the different aspects of the coaching and what they're trying to achieve while teaching and educating players. So for us, it's going to be a learning process on both sides. I've yet to either speak at a seminar or give a course where I haven't come away myself having learned something. So myself and Magic have worked hard to get where we are, like, as I'm sure a lot of players and coaches can relate to. It's not always an easy road. We've lots of ups and downs on it. But like as we've heard throughout any of the discussions, hard work and persistence, and you can achieve your goals. The one thing I would say is, one thing we're not top of our game at is public speaking and presenting. So if at any stage we struggle slightly, please don't judge us. But hopefully it should go fairly smoothly. So roll it there, Roisin. Magic, first slide up.
Okay, there we go. We already covered this one.
So basically, it's just a quick outline of the topics that we're going to be presenting on. As Paul has mentioned already, between a discussion between himself and Paul, they kind of decided the important aspects of the game that they felt that would work well for this particular platform. The first one we're going to be speaking about is the 0 step. The second one is transition fouling. And the last one is the referee-coach relationship. And again, it's going to be very beneficial from both sides. As a learning aspect. So we'll move on to the first one, which is the 0 step. So FIBA changed the rule for the 0 step in 2017, and basically it's to have a common worldwide traveling rule, so which better reflects the actions on the court. And again, as coaches and players that have logged in here, everybody has the realization that the game is constantly improving, moving forward. And again, it's the speed, if everything else. So the new wording, which again, a lot of slides now you'll see for the next couple of minutes are going to be wording, but don't worry about that because we'll break it down. So while moving and having one foot on the floor while catching the ball or ending a dribble, the next foot or feet to touch the floor is step 1, and this will become the pivot foot. So basically, what that's saying is, if you are receiving the ball on the move, this is when the 0 step comes into play, and also if we are ending a dribble. All right, but in relation to a stationary player receiving the ball, the rule doesn't change. So if we just flick on to the next slide, it's basically, it is the outline of the rule itself. So as you can see, it's very wordy. And this particular slide I've taken from the 2017, and this is the year that the rule actually changed. So all of the highlighted information is all of the new information that FIBA outlined as the new rule. So as you can see, lots of words, but don't worry about that, because when we flick on to the next slide, I've purely put in the next slide to show that it's actually coming in to now, which is the 2018 rulebook, which was applicable in 2019. The wording is the very same, but as you can see, the highlighted version has disappeared because this is now the current rule. So the next slide. This is a video, and what is going to happen in this, it's going to be a few minutes long, but what it does is it goes through an awful lot of individual situations. So whether it be receiving the ball from a pass, a burst up and cut, anything like that. And what's going to happen is you're going to see it the first time as a motion, the second time it's going to be slowed down, and the third time you see it, it will actually be broken down and given each individual step. And at the end, it will then say whether this is legal or illegal. So what we can do is, Magic, if you want to play it there the first time. Now, there may be a slight lag, but hopefully it should be fairly fluid to a point that we can see it. Myself and Magic, we're going to record this ourselves, but unfortunately, due to social distancing, we've had to, leave it to the chap that did it initially. So as you can see, there's 0, 1, 2, and he comes up for the shot. So that's legal. So each different situation is going to give you, as I said, the breakdown of it. So he's receiving the ball, and as you can see there, it's not as easy to see the individual steps, but when it's slowed down, 0, 1, and 2. And what's happening is, and even it might be an idea for when you're looking at the different situations, if as players or coaches, if you just kind of say to yourself, the first time we see it there, just make a split decision on whether we feel it's legal or illegal. And then when it's broken down, we can actually then see maybe a situation where something looked legal, but it transpires that it wasn't, or vice versa, it looked illegal, but technically when you break it down and do the individual steps, and especially then with the 0 step involved, it's a legal play.
Oh, sorry, guys.
Roll it on there, Roisin. Yeah. Do you want to bring it on just a little bit then to where we were? Perfect. So a lot of the time, as I mentioned before, because the game is getting so much quicker, and something that Paul had mentioned to us, because when we sent the presentation on, something that this doesn't go through is actually the catch and transition, which is really the part of the game that's been sped up, and due to the 0 step, it's really increasing it. But the likes of these inside moves now that comes from the top and goes down, again, it's just giving the player that little bit of extra freedom that they're gathering their balance, and then they're able to do their pivot move and also get free to make it a better play to the basket. And again, this one, which I find very good, and also it gives the player such an advantage to get to the opposite side and also away from his defender. And again, it's just a slight lag, so apologies on that. So we've got our 0 step, 1. Once we get to the second, he then keeps his 1, which is his pivot foot, and he lifts it only to release it. So therefore, that's why it's still legal. And that, as I said, is giving him such leverage in the space that he creates, and also gets him to the opposite side of the basket for the easier. Well, I'm saying easier. I don't play, so but it gives him the opportunity to go that way. Again, I believe that this will also be available as a presentation at the end. So what will happen is it actually, if it lags slightly, then we have a better chance of watching it in real time if you want the presentation itself. But again, on this one, and it's the simple, he drives in, perhaps he's met with a strong defensive player and decides to pivot it back out. So again, a 0 step, gets his 1, he plants a second, but again, he has the freedom to move his second again because he hasn't lifted his initial pivot foot. And this one, I think, is one that Paul particularly mentioned when we were watching it between yesterday and today. It's on the catch, which again gives him the opportunity to perhaps, again, 0, 1, 2. And it's that split second as which foot is either on the floor or off the floor as he receives the ball. So because neither foot is off on the floor as he catches it, so as soon as the 1 foot lands, which in that case is his left, that becomes a 0, and then you've got your 1, 2. And again, it's about educating the players from such an early age, as we were saying, that there's such a variety across the board, from, we'll say, underage kids, bringing them right up to the possibility of reaching the men's Super League. If this, and they view video clips like this is where the teach them young, as they say, but it's habits. It's all about habits. And if we can get into the habit as players to use the correct footwork, but also then as referees to see the correct movements, and not then have a situation where we're coming across something in a game that's unfamiliar and therefore our reaction time isn't quick enough, or we see something that doesn't look right, so not automatically we call it incorrectly. But viewing the video like this, that breaks it down individually, step by step, it's a great learning tool for us. These ones, again, these are situations that you don't generally see an awful lot of, because like that, if they're on the move, they tend to continue on to either pass off or do the layup, but it's the one that then brings it. And again, for us as referees, it's very difficult in such a quick game to see that split second of, is the ball released before the pivot foot lifts, or is it a case of he lifts his pivot foot after the ball is released, therefore it's no travel? Because you two things you can do. You can lift your pivot foot in order to pass the ball or shoot. And again, as we mentioned earlier on, the game is getting so much quicker. For us as referees, then we have to be judging stuff so much quicker. this one again is broken down for he's receiving the ball, his 0 step, 1, 2, but he gets a second opportunity because once he pivots on his first, he releases the ball before his pivot foot. So therefore, he actually gets a second opportunity to start as 0, 1, 2 again, which again, if done correctly from a player, gives them a massive opportunity. But again, also when the referees are knowing it fully inside out and calling it correctly, it's just allowing the game to develop, constantly develop. And I'm sure throughout all of these clips, anyone that's guessing along has guessed correctly. Again, we're just looking at a step back for a shot. So as you can see in that situation, he goes and he has his 2 2s, which again, he still can only pass or shoot once he lifts. And in that situation, then obviously he had lifted. And as you can see there, the foot lifted before he had released or gone up for a shot. So that's where the illegal came from in that situation.
Are we back to the start now then? There we are.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah,
That's it.
I think that was the last one. Was this like slow motion? Could you see at the same time when I?
Yeah, it was pretty good. It was pretty good. I'm going to ask a couple of questions there because we've got nothing in so far. I guess a couple of things there on that. The 0, 1, 2 and then dribble. So on the catch or without the 0, 1, 2 dribble, say for example, allows you another 0, 1, 2. Is that correct from what I'm seeing?
From what the situation in that one is, once the ball is, so if it's a 0, 1, 2 and it's he releases it before, so he can't have a second dribble.
Yeah.
But what he can have is he can have a second, if he catches the ball on the bounce, so it's going 0, 1, 2 and he twists, he can then lift it up from that particular clip. Is it the one inside the basket you're speaking of?
It was the second one. So like he dribbled, he reverse pivoted, 0, 1, 2, dribbled and got another 1, 2 after that.
Magic, do you know which one he's?
So yeah, I think that Paul, you're just referring to the clip when the player during progressing to the basket, he's getting the ball, he's got it 0, 1, 2, catching the ball, and then is the dribble.
Yeah.
It's
And
layup. Yes,
now,
yes.
Yeah, so this is change, and this is still legal, which was kind of as Emma already mentioned, it's hard to judge, especially when we are talking about the quick progress on the transition, that everything is happening in recent basketball, and the way the players are playing, they're more skillful, and the speed of play, it's nothing to compare what we've seen in the past. And that's one of the reasons I think the FIBA implement the 0 step to have to stop referees to stop this type of the action. To really, they want to get the game moving, really, because there's no effect for the players, no effect for defensive player, and really no, that's the 0 step. It's apply, and that's the correct.
So let's compare the men and the women's game right now. Having coached in the women's game and the men's, I always felt that the ladies were able to not execute better, but because they may not be perceived to be as athletic, were being refereed better with their footwork. Is that a fair assessment? Because I've seen where men have made the exact same move and they've been called travel. So is the difficulty between athleticism, or is it that the men just aren't doing the footwork as well as the women?
Do you know, it's a very good point, and I think the last bit there that you mentioned, is it a case of athleticism, as in that, or are the men just not doing it correctly? I think there's a number of situations that we will see an inconsistency between the men and the women's game. And firstly is the men's game, and again, it's no disrespectful to the women, but the men's game tends to be quicker. All right, so what we're seeing is perhaps incorrect judgment in that split second that we have to make the decision. But again, there's across the board, we have situations, and again, this comes back to educating. And again, like the players, for the referees, for us as referee educators, we use certain teaching tools. So one will be the position in which we stand in the lead. So if we're talking about footwork under the boards or in the paint, what tends to happen is in certain gyms we'll have massive areas off the baseline that we can step back, and what we use terminology wise will be that we have a full open window, and in that situation we can see everything we need to see, from the footwork to the body, to judge the contact and the footwork. And then in some situations we may be closer into the baseline, and it could be a less experienced referee that has started out refereeing, and like everybody, you tend to kind of draw yourself close to the play, and what's happening is they're possibly not seeing the full play. And then, as you said, perhaps the women may be executing it better in certain situations, or we could have just a speed thing where, unfortunately, and the onus then is on us as referees to get better, to make that split decision correctly. What we need to be doing is we need to be refereeing off impulse and not processing it, because when we process something, it obviously delays it, and then it could be too late. So if we see something, what we need to be active mindset to make that decision as it happens, opposed to, oh, that looks weird, will I call it, will I not? And I think it sounds like a very long-winded answer to your question, Paul, but there's so many different aspects of it coming into play.
The spin move now. So I mean, I coached Sean Achupam a few years back, and we pretty much had to eliminate his spin move, because it was one of his go-tos and was one of his strengths when we hired him. So is that something that's easier to referee now, or has it become more difficult?
I would think it's become easier to referee, because like that with the 0 step, there's more of a kind of an alleviation or a gap for them to make that move. And then for us across the board, there's actually coming across better educational tools for us to be able to know the rules inside out. And it's like everything, players get better by practicing, and referees are the very same. But unfortunately, we don't get to practice on our own in a gym with certain situations in real time. But with the likes of especially this, or the video feedback, and again, so many more games now are being recorded, that for us to sit down and analyze situations, then that spin move to us is every day, and it's something that we have watched 1,000 times, so we can tell straight away that's a legal spin move or that's an illegal spin move. So again, I think as overall, just like the game is developing, it's developing for us as referees, and it's about that education and wanting to learn.
So just off of the spin move in the second and third last clips, so he spun move one, what we call 1 to 2, and 1 to stride. So our stride stops, you know, we've called pro stops or stride stops, whatever it is. So I suppose what's come about is you can't pivot off of one. So when you land 1 foot, take off of 1 foot, land to 2, and use the 0 step, you're not allowed pivot anymore. Is that correct?
Sorry, so just repeat that one again. When you land,
On
so
the
your
spin
first
move,
foot is 0 step?
the spin move is the 0 step. Your
Yep.
drop step becomes your 1 step. You
Yep.
take off your 1 step and land on 2. So now you've landed on 2 feet.
So that's
you're not
illegal.
allowed- Pardon?
So basically, just to come back, Paul, on your previous question, from the referee perspective, I think it's two sides. From one side, it's a little bit more difficult for the referees to judge now the spin, because in the past, mainly, we were focusing on the pivot foot. That's the one that we're just discussing right now. And it was really, maybe not straightforward, but easier for us to, as Emma mentioned, to see. We, as a referees, we're looking here, we see there's the pivot foot. Now we see the second foot is the moving foot. Now when the FIBA introduced the 0 step, now we have to take into consideration that we have a 0 step, and then we need to really know which foot is the pivot foot that the player starts established position on the floor. So in this case, I think, I believe that's the question is, so once we have 0 step, then the player's second, which is 1, which is his pivot foot, then he's allowed to shoot. He can move the moving foot, which is the second foot, or pass. He cannot jump again on the 2 foot. That's illegal.
Okay, so that would be what we call a double pivot. Well, what I call a double pivot. So that's not allowed anymore with that. Perfect. So just a quick question.
I think there was the one example on the clips, one of them that we already saw, that the player, they get the ball in the low post, and then he started with 0 foot, first foot, and then he jumped again on the 2 foot.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple of questions come in terms of the referee study on this, or the referee education on this. Is it something that they get these videos and have to learn themselves, or are there clinics that you all go to in order to kind of get the up-to-date rules every year? Because I think they change every 2 or 3 years, or updated every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, FIBA would have generally kind of brought rule changes in after any of the major competitions. So, i.e., the 2017s was after the 2016 Rio Olympics, and then like that, if they have a Eurobasket tournament or they're coming across issues that they feel they need to revise, so that's generally when they change. Now they're becoming a lot more frequent. So for us as referees, yeah, but what would generally happen is, from a local league perspective, now I can only really speak from the areas that I have been involved in, as in the DOA. What would generally happen is we would have a pre-season seminar, and all of the new rules and the changes will be introduced. So they will be presented, and again, it could be clip-based workshops, anything like that. So then again, all those tools are given to us as individual referees to go back and watch. Now across the board, they would be distributed to all the different areas. So I can't speak, as I said, for every individual area association, but what would generally happen is that there would be seminars pre-season, that all the new rules will be gone through. And again, what tend to happen, and again with the DOA, and especially with National League, what we have is we have our pre-season seminar at National League level. We are having now mid-season seminars and also some workshops, and they're brought around the different counties. And again, it's presentations on the new rules or any issues that have, we'll say, been cropping up on a consistent basis. And again, that reverts back to being able to use the video analysis. So as we're seeing trends, the same way I'm sure as coaches, if you're watching video and game tapes, you're seeing a consistent issue, we'll say, with a certain defense. And for us as referees, then if we watch 10, 12 games, and out of those 10 games, there's constantly charge blocks that we're getting incorrect and are inconsistent, then that was how the education would generally be processed mid-season. But for the new rules, yeah, they would generally always be presented pre-season in your local league, and then, as I said, for National League, 100% at the conference. They are definitely, a lot of time is taken up with new
So
rules.
that's fair. And then, like, I guess we all reassess as coaches. We reassess at some point during the year whether things are going well, why are we doing well, why are we not doing well. It's well, from what I'm hearing, the referees doing the very same thing. I guess, let's say you identify there's a trend that's not going so well, and there's a trend that is going so well. Is that communicated back out to the clubs that you might be reassessing how you're refereeing this?
That would be more of a question that I'm afraid Paul Dempsey probably will be able to answer in relation to the communication that's going on. But I do know that we as a group would generally be getting feedback. You know, if we are getting emails in relation to seminars coming up or self-assessment forms, which we have done after each game, we would be generally getting the feedback of this area of the game. We're coming across a consistency of a poor consistency in it, or this area of the game has been refereed really well, and it goes to show that the work has been put in certain different areas. So yeah, it would be communicated to us as officials, because again, as you say, if we're identifying it, the biggest thing is it's all about communicating to us what's going well, but also communicating what's not going well and being able to own it and rectify it as best we can.
Okay, so
I think.
Oh yeah,
I
sorry,
think
man.
Paul, yeah, just to add what Emma mentioned, I think it's from the bottom, from the local league through national level and then FIBA competition. We've been, as a referees, we've been assessed nearly each game. Not maybe most of the game. There's loads of games at the local league. There's a assessor, observer attend to watch the game. The similar scenario is at the national level, and similar is at the FIBA competition as well. And then based on all the feedbacks and from the assessor or observer, which are held by the local development officer, but national level to Paul Dempsey or FIBA level, they maintain and they looked on the main issues that are showing on the reports after each game. And then if there is some common issue that the referees that let's say they're watching and they think, oh, there's the issue with a 0 step, then we've been followed with the additional support materials, clips. What's happened, what I'm seeing, what's happened here at the local league in DOA, that's similar. Emma, I'm involved in DOA or national level. Every time that we have opportunity, we have a mid seminars, we have a pre-big competition seminar at the national level where we discuss and we reviewing, trying to educate the referees and help them. Really, this is all about helping us as well. I think we are humans as well, and making mistakes is part of our job. But once we see or the national instructor or local association, it's getting informed there is some common topic which is the issue, then we are followed with kind of like additional information, review the rules, mainly by seminar, that we are having additional seminar to support us. That's the way we are learning as well.
Just, I'm going to finish up these so we can move on to the next phase. And I suppose I'm able to link these two here. One, with the new 0 step, is it encouraged to give the advantage to the offense, for example? And with that, are we seeing more travels in the game or less travels in the game now?
Do you want to take that, Mike?
I will say less travel.
I would be in agreement.
Yeah, this is the way why FIBA introduced this additional. It's not really the rule. It's kind of like an interpretation. Like it's the rule.
An add-on.
Add-on, yeah, exactly. And just to give us to stop stopping the play, to stop stopping the show, really.
I would think that at the start, Paul, what we may have been seeing was especially again if we're going back from, we'll say, local league all the way up. At the start, it's like everything when something is introduced, and as Irish people, someone has once said, we go from A to Z. So we go from calling everything as a travel because something has changed to, oh God, this isn't right, we'll go to calling nothing as a travel. And again, it's about once we get the correct material and everything that's gone with it, once we perfect it, then again I would say that we're going to be seeing and should be seeing less travels, because again it's all about allowing the game to develop, and that's what FIBA are trying to do.
So going back to the original part of that, does that mean that there's an encouragement to give the offense an advantage?
I would say yes.
Okay. All right. I think that's been a fairly healthy debate there. So what we can do is, Magic, don't be laughing.
No.
Don't be laughing. So I think we move on to the next one. I think this is going to be really interesting too, because I think this has, what's this in now, a year, maybe 2 years? We just finished our second year with the old, what we used to call cynical fouling, which is now called transition fouling. So
yeah, it's nearly 3 years now. Yeah. So hold on, let's just try.
Okay. So I'll leave it with you, Magic. I'll pop back in a while.
Okay. So now we're just gonna move to the second topic of this presentation. Before I kick off, I really want to say, as Emma mentioned already at the beginning of the presentation, say thank you to Paul and all the people involved to having this presentation. Hopefully it will be beneficial for both sides as well. So in this topic, we're gonna discuss the fouls which occurs during the transition. And to starting point, we have three main types of situation or call that could appear during the transitional fast break. First one, it's no call, and sometimes it refers to accidental or slight contact during transition. We as a referee, we refer to the RSBQ, which is referred to read, speed, balance, and quickness. And what I mean by that, as a referees, we just refer, if there's no impact of offensive player on his read, speed, balance, and quickness, there will be no call. And there's something that we just discussed, Paul, and it's to don't stop the music, really. Let them play. So that's the first type of scenario that you can see during transition, is the no call. The second one will be the personal foul, when the referee in their judgment during transition, they will call as a personal foul. This situation refers really when we have a defensive player in his legal guarding position, and there is attempt to play the ball. I will show you in the second couple of slides to give you the more explanation and clarity on this one. But there is a possibility during the transition and fast break when the referee, by his judgment, will decide to call as a personal foul. The third situation is unsportsmanlike foul, and this is unnecessary contact or no legitimate attempt to play the ball. And I'm just gonna go. So we have three really situations that could happen that the referee will judge the criteria. We use the certain criteria to judge, is it gonna be call, personal, no call, personal foul, or unsportsmanlike foul. On this slide, you can see the wording from the basketball rule book. So at any stage, you can refer and get the clarity about the unsportsmanlike foul. Currently, we have five criteria for the unsportsmanlike foul. Just before we move to the next slide, the only thing what I would like to pay your attention is the bottom part of this clip of the slide highlighted. The official must interpret the unsportsmanlike foul consistently through the game to judge the action only, and this is really big one. If we refer to the transition foul, no calls, or normal foul. So as I mentioned, we have five criteria for unsportsmanlike fouls. On the purpose of this presentation and the topic that we are discussing, which is the foul during transition, mainly we're gonna focus on the two of them, and in the referee language, we call each of the criteria of the unsportsmanlike foul, we call them C1, C2, C3, C4, and C5. I believe that, and that's something that we discussed as well, Paul, that coaches, they're using their own language, and it's similar to the referees, and this is kind of like a language that the referees, as a referees, we are using when we communicate between each other during the live game, timeouts, and we can, or after the game. So mainly for this presentation, we're gonna focus on the C3 and C5, C3 and C4. C3, I'm just gonna move to the next one. So C3 is unnecessary contact by defensive player. Basically, as Paul probably mentioned, this rule was introduced by FIBA early 2017, and it was mainly in order to stop unnecessary contact during the transition. And then the next one is C4. C4 was probably now for a couple of years, and this refers to legal contact from behind or laterally. And so C4, and the other thing to add it to the C4 is, and this is we seeing this loads of question during the games, that this criteria only apply until the act of shooting of the offensive player starts. So just in short, if we got the transition, fast break, and there's the contact, and the offensive player haven't been started the act of shooting yet, this is unsportsmanlike foul. Once he picks up the ball and start act of shooting, this criteria is not applied anymore. And we can see the even situation which I saw it, that the offensive player start his act of shooting by making 2 steps even around the 3-point line. But once he's pick up the ball and start act of shooting, this criteria for the unsportsmanlike foul for defensive player for illegal contact from behind or laterally, it's not applied anymore. It could be additional one as a hard foul or any other criteria from the sportsman foul that referee could apply, judging on the action what's happened. But C4 is don't apply anymore once the act of shooting it starts. And so basically C3, as I mentioned already, this was introduced recently, 2017, and FIBA introduced this criteria just to clean up the transition. So basically they don't want to see the kind of, I can call it cheap fouls by defensive player. When we have a fast break and the defensive player, he knew there's no way he can stop it or just get the ball, he just pulled his head, and we're gonna say, I'm gonna show you the clips, the samples in a second. They're just pulling the head up, arm out to stop the offensive player. And sometimes you can even see that they're putting the hands up straight away. They know there's the foul. So that's FIBA trying to cut it as much as possible. And that's why they introduced this C3 addition criteria for unsportsmanlike foul. So now I'm going to show you just a couple of sample clips, just a different sample of when the referees called the normal foul on unsportsmanlike foul. Mainly we'll be focusing on the C3, the new criteria for the unsportsmanlike foul, and I will show you some samples here. Before each clip, you will see some picture. So now the first clip will refer to the situation when the referee called the normal foul, when we have a defensive player in this situation in white, which he will be in the legal guarding position, and he will be trying to, there will be the contact. Oh, there will be the contact. Sure, maybe it's going to be easier that way. So So in this situation that we just saw, we have a blue player, offensive player starting the transition, white player in defense. He's in the legal guarding position. He's using the correct arm, which is still correct, attempting to play the ball, to reach for the ball. And that's good sample to show this should be called as a normal foul, because he's still facing the offensive, he's still facing offensive player, his legal guarding position, and he's using the correct arm to reach for the ball. There will be another, and the second sample that you're gonna see, we have a player white in offense, red is in defense, and red player has no legal guarding position, and basically, you will see in a second, she's just chasing the offensive player to stop the offense for white player to get the easy basket on the transition. Let me just quick. You will see in a second the full action from the beginning. So that's the last part of the. So now white. I'm just gonna play it again. Show you something. So yeah, there we go. No intention to play the ball, and really she was chasing the offensive player. And there's the foul. And this is an unsportsmanlike foul under the criteria C3. Okay, so on this clip, we're gonna see the situation when we have a blue player in offense, white in defense. In this scenario, we have a white player, which is in the legal guarding position. The only difference to the first one clip that we just saw, the defensive player, there's no attempt to maintain his legal guarding position. I'll show in a second. There will be no attempt to, he just want to stop the fast break. So as you can see, his legal guarding position, he's in front of the offensive player, but he did not want to maintain his legal guarding position. He just pulled his arm out and he just want to stop the fast break. And the last clip, it's another sample of the C3 criteria for the unsportsmanlike foul, where the defensive player wants to just stop the fast break.
Magic, just on those real quick, I don't know how many more you've left, but maybe could we kind of get a definition of what the legal guarding position is, so therefore we understand. It's quite clear on those that there's no attempt on the ball, so they're pretty good ones to show what not to do. But in terms of being in a legal position, what is the official description or criteria of a legal guarding position?
So from the from the rule book, if we go, so but I don't want to go through the rule book. Legal guarding position, it's how we call this inside of his cylinder. So we have 2 feet on the floor, kind of natural going up from the floor, and hands. I'm not sure. Sorry if you can see me because I'm just I can see camera. Hold on, maybe it's gonna be easier. So we got, yeah, you can see me now. So legal guarding position, we have a 2 feet on the floor going up inside of him cylinder, a normal posture, how we call it, yeah.
Posture, yes, yeah.
Going up to the top, facing offensive player. So this is sometimes, which is probably the easiest way to explain that you probably notice, calling offensive foul when we have a player setting the screen, facing the player, but his 2 ankles outside of his cylinder, because it's not normal. He's trying to use the additional space to just make his screen easier to set it. And this is similar for the transition as well. When we have, the main thing is to have a facing the offensive player and be inside of his cylinder.
And again, it's about exactly how you can move. So once you've got your legal guarding position, you can move laterally or backwards in order to maintain that, but not forward into a player. And that, in the last clip there, as you can see, he had his legal guarding position, but he made no attempt to maintain it, be that moving either laterally or behind. And that's the important part.
So the question just come in there, and I suppose clarification really on the first clip where the guy was in legal guard position and then reached across his body with his right arm. That was clearly coming out of the legal guarding position across and led to an unsportsmanlike foul. If he had went with his left arm, could it have been called unsportsmanlike? If he had kept his feet but he leaned, would that still be an unsportsmanlike, or would he have had to get the full body across for it not to be an unsportsmanlike foul? Does that make sense?
So is this, sorry, is this the first clip, is it?
Yeah, I think it's the easiest way to just answer this one if you compare the first and the third one. So the first and third clip, we have the first clip when we have both clips, we have a defensive player in the legal guarding position. And as you can see on the both clips, that's the reason we pick up those clips. On the first one, we call this as a right arm. Because the reason is, even if the referee could still decide to don't call it, we could judge at this stage as they use it as a normal foul or let it go, because offensive player can still go ahead with the transition. On the third, comparing to the third clip, there's the defensive players in the legal guarding position, but because of the defensive player putting his arm out, the wrong arm, in that case, he could hold the offensive player and physically stop. There's the impact on the RBSQ in that case. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think what's important is when we see clips, and again, it's about educating about the players about how to try and steal the ball where you're not going to get in a situation where it's going to be an unsportsmanlike foul. And the right arm, which technically would look like the wrong arm because it's the furthest from the side of the ball, but the reason it's the right arm to go for is because if the defensive player is successful in reaching for the ball, they can then maintain their dribble to go forward. Whereas, as Magic stated, if they use the other arm, all they're doing is they're just blocking the offensive player. Whereas when they're using the furthest arm, which is technically the right arm to use, if they are successful in the interception, they can then continue with their dribble. Does that make sense?
So I'm going to leave this question to last. There's one or two after coming in about players and coaches educating and stuff like that, and midweek games. I'm going to leave that to the end because I think that might encompass all the sections. So right now, I don't think anything else come in on that section. Yeah. Okay, so who's up for section 3, and then we'll ask collective questions again at the end.
It's myself for the old
I'm
relationships.
gonna Perfect. Here we go.
Okay, so this is one of quite a large topic, and something that I feel tonight actually demonstrates that it is something that I believe is definitely progressing in the right way. And if it's maintained, and especially with us as referees being educated in relation to the coaching of the game and the development of the game, and for coaches then to be also educated in the rules of the game and what the referees are trying to achieve on the floor. It's referee coach relationships, as I said, I believe they are on the up, and they're building it. And again, it just goes to show, and especially the fact that Paul has invited us to give this just demonstrates that. So I think this is a great topic, and I do believe that both sides again will get an awful lot from it. So in relation to communication, and especially as referees, how do we do it? So how do we as referees communicate with coaches and players? So I've just literally broke it down there. Now, obviously, I'm sure there are some other ways that we do it, but so how do we do it? We do it with our whistle, body language, and verbal. And verbal is massive, and it's something, again, that FIBA has really, really emphasised in the last couple of years, to the point of that they are now asking us as referees to verbalise our signals, but also verbalise our calls at the point of contact. So again, it's about communicating, and it just goes to show that FIBA themselves are really pushing this. So when do we do it? An awful lot of the time it would be dead ball situations. We're doing it in some live ball situations. The last point I have there is just not after every whistle. And again, that will just kind of come into the forefront when we're discussing bits and pieces later on. But what I would say is that, again, it's like players and coaches. If there's constant communication, if I'm a player and my coach, I'm sure, is constantly, continually talking, I'm sure as the player it's difficult to maintain concentration. And for us as referees, it's the very same. So what we are encouraging to do is absolutely we will communicate, but if it happens after every whistle, then unfortunately that's where the issues may arise. So why do we communicate? Number one, to be respectful. And this goes both ways. So why do referees communicate with coaches? To be respectful, because we've worn respect on our arms for years, and we cannot under any circumstances ask for respect if we're not going to be respectful to both players and coaches and everyone involved in the game, table officials. So that for us is the most important. We do it to give information in relation to our signals, whether it's an out of bounds or if it's a foul, what number it is, all that is, we're given information. And the last one is to prevent situations. And this again is massive. And I think it's something that across the board is possibly not recognised as much by players and coaches as to how us as referees are doing it and why we're doing it. And again, this comes from an early start. If we're given referee courses, what we're encouraging people to do is use preventative officiating, use it through communication. So it could be something simple. And again, if we're talking about underage, so we have a player that's constantly traveling, and we looked at that earlier on. So it could be a case of that he's constantly lifting his pivot foot before he releases the ball. So is it a situation that we could say to the coach at the end of a timeout, number 6, constantly lifting before he releases the ball? So it could be a case of to pass on that. As we move up the leagues, and again, if at National League, what we're doing is it could be 15, get your hands off. 14, just be careful of your screens. And again, it's to prevent the situation happening. If it's at the end of a timeout and the coaches are coming back onto the floor, it could be a case of, listen, we're in the last 2 minutes, so make sure that if it's going to be a foul, we wait until the ball is inbounded. And that's not a case of giving that team an advantage, because we do it on both sides, and we do it quite clearly, quite verbally, that everybody can hear. So again, as I said, I don't believe that it's recognised. And again, for us, it's about preventing. And it could always, and again, this is something that a lot of people, the captain is the only person that can communicate with the referee. That's not always the case. And the reason being is, sometimes if I'm trying to prevent a situation, so if I have a player number 15 who is borderline screens, and he's matching up with a player that's, they're getting to that point where something may escalate. So for me, I need to prevent it. But 15 possibly isn't in a state of mind to communicate with me as a referee. So what I may do is I may to go to a different player on that team that I know can communicate with him. So it could be I could go to number 4 and say, 4, will you just ask 15 to watch the screens? And again, I'm doing it to prevent the situation, but I'm also reading the situation and not going to that individual that may be slightly, aroused is a word I use that shouldn't probably, but that they may go over the line. So it's about preventing the situation. So if we move on.
Yeah,
sorry.
Emma, just a quick one, just to add this to this topic on the preventing situation. I think it's as Emma you already mentioned, it's really important, and it's not recognized really from my own perspective at the higher level. The players really, they feel maybe it's personal, or they feel confident when we constantly talking to them, like a short word, good defense, play on, good screen. They know that they are playing well. But the same apply to the lower league, school league, or national regional league. When we as a referee, by talking to the players during the game, we just teach them as well. So we just prevent making calls, or we just helping a little bit as well. This is probably something that is not recognized, that we as a referee, we just, by talking to the players, we just helping them to get the ball, to get the show going.
Okay, go on.
Okay. Oh. Yeah.
Okay, so again, this is impulse versus self-control. And again, this applies across the board to coaches, players, referees. Everybody has this human reaction, and we all, react on impulse a lot of the time. And for referees, one of the most important things is not to react on impulse. We must have self-control. And again, that's something that we try and educate referees from a very early stage when they do their first course. And it's, regardless of what's happening off the court, be that a parent that may be telling you how good you are after every call, or a situation that may have happened earlier on in the game, we must be able to control our emotions internally and to do our job as professionally as possible and have that self-control. So we must be acting with self-control opposed to acting off impulse. And I think that applies also to coaches and players. So if we say coach may or may not be starting off his career as a coach, and as Paul mentioned earlier on, sometimes it may be a case of that they're not 110% on a rule, so they're reacting to something that is being called correctly, but again, it could be just down to miseducation. So again, can they use that self-control to, right, I need to maintain my composure and so on. And again, with the players, and if it's educated in players from a young age, then obviously they will take it on throughout their career. Whereas if it starts, even as a referee, to be impulsive when I start refereeing, as I gain experience, it's going to be very hard to get out of that. So it's about teaching a habit and how something should be done from an early age, and continuing to bring that on. And again, I think that's massively important, that impulse versus self-control. Go ahead there, Magic. So what's important for us? So again, this goes across the board. We don't ignore a protest. We may not interact every time, but what we do is we can't ignore it. So it could be a subtle hand gesture on the way by, perhaps asking a bench to sit down. And again, it's a low hand gesture opposed to up in their face. So it's just a low hand gesture to perhaps go down. Use empathy and ability to communicate. This is also very important. We must empathize and then use our ability to communicate. So again, this refers back to an automatic, quick human reaction. So if there's a foul situation that the player believes they've been fouled and it hasn't been called, and it's a quick, raise of the arms, and they go straight back down, you know, we have to be empathetic in situations like that and allow it to a point. But as I said, it's a human reaction, so it's up and straight back down, and it's not constant. And again, we can communicate that and use every opportunity we can to communicate that. To talk disrespectfully is not acceptable. And again, as referees, this applies to us as much as it applies to coaches and players. Under no circumstances is it all right for any referee of any age, of any experience, to be disrespectful to either players or coaches. And I would then throw that back on the players and the coaches, regardless of how long they're coaching or how long they're playing, or, you know, just being disrespectful. It's just not acceptable across the board, from anyone that's starting out to has been refereeing for however many years, and that is massive. I said it earlier on, we wore respect on our arm, but we cannot expect it if we are not willing to give it. Don't speak to referees and coaches during timeouts, always wait till the end. This is also very important. A lot of the time, you know, frustrations could be building, and a timeout happens and a coach wants to come at you to have a discussion, or to, we'll say, air what they feel may or may not be going well. Again, it could be a situation where us as referees feel we need to communicate. Again, it could be that there's a player on the brink of perhaps maybe going on to an unsportsmanlike foul, which we need to kind of get them to calm down. But that timeout is the coach's timeout to coach his team. It is also our timeout to discuss whatever it is that needs to be discussed. And again, this applies for all levels, be that local league, under 10s, under 18s, or if we go national league. There is no problem at the end of a timeout communicating. And again, it's not how we say, or it's not what we say, it's how we say it. So if there is a coach asking to talk at the start of a timeout, we cannot ignore it, because we must communicate. So it's like, no problem, coach, I will communicate with you, but it will be at the end of the timeout. And again, the last thing a coach wants is aggravated, is for a referee to come over and tap him on the shoulder and say, sorry, could you just ask your 15? And I'm taking up his time in his timeout. So again, that's massively important for us, about building the relationships into when we communicate and when we don't. And don't allow people from the bench to stand other than the coach, assistant coach, if the coach is not. So again, the assistant coach can stand as long as the coach himself isn't. And again, we spoke about human reactions earlier on. You have a very close game. It's the under 10s final. Everybody's turned up, the parents are there, everybody's going mad, and we're going into the last quarter, and the last 2 minutes, the away team equalise, and their bench goes nuts. Absolutely, they're going to. That's impulse, it's excitement, it's part of the game. It builds everything, it builds the atmosphere. But for us as referees, we must manage it. So again, as I said, it could be a simple, once they jump up and go straight back down, that's absolutely fine. But if it is in relation to a call and it's constant, or there's arms waving, or there's verbals coming from the bench and they're constantly standing, that's when it has to be dealt with. And again, for coaches, I'm sure it's quite irritating sometimes that if an assistant coach is just standing to maybe say to the coach, I think we should be doing this, or I think we should be doing that. So again, what we as referees do is we'll try and communicate that. So it could be a little chat of, look, I'm really sorry, but is there any chance one of you could sit down? Or if it is just a quick stand up, something said, and a really quick sit down, that wouldn't cause an issue. But why we must deal with it early on is because if the game is going up and down and everything is fine and there's two coaches standing, it's not really affecting us, it's not affecting the game, and it's not affecting ye. But if we come down to the last 2 minutes and everything has come down to the wire and there's two coaches standing, and then as a referee I go and approach the bench and ask them to sit down because now their verbals are getting louder and so on, then that's the inconsistency. And again, it's irritating because you've been allowed to do it for the game. So it's about communicating it early on in a nice way, in a friendly manner, and especially if it's not causing us any trouble. But again, it's to prevent it causing any trouble near the end. So we can roll on there. So again, we have two types of communication mainly within our game, and that's verbal and gestural. And I actually quite like that word, gestural. But again, it's about how we do it. So tone is massively important. So we must talk in the correct tone and not shouting. Because again, if we were walking down the street and someone started shouting at us, we generally wouldn't tend to be A, to impress, or B, to communicate back. So it's all about how we speak and the tone in which we do it. Communication must be short. And again, I was listening to Tommy O'Mahony the other night, and he was speaking about plays that he had for his players. And he would generally always use short language. Because again, as he said, if you're communicating too much, the confusion sets in. The very same for referees. So if I'm communicating with a player or I'm communicating with a coach, what we encourage referees to do is short and precise. So if a question is asked, we will answer the question. But what we need to stay away from is that a coach asks a question and we give an answer, and then they ask another 2 questions or they elaborate much more. And again, if a coach asks us a question and then we then give the answer, but then go back into something that we may not be happy with that their team is doing. So again, that applies for both sides. So it must be short and concise. Always allow both sides to communicate. If as a referee, a coach is asking me a question, for me, it's extremely frustrating if I go to answer and then they just walk away or they dismiss me, because what they're telling me is that they don't really want to communicate, they just want to get it off their chest. And again, it works both ways for the referee. So if me as a referee and I'm communicating with a coach, I will then expect the coach to acknowledge the fact. Now, as we've all come across, they may not like what we're saying. And for argument's sake, if I went to Paul and I said, well, you know, it's not an illegal screen because I feel that he is in his position and he's not moving, he may not like that answer and he may say back to me, well, I believe he's moving. And again, that's the communication. It's short and sweet, but it's in a nice tone and it's concise. And it's also not forbidden to own mistakes. I said at the start of this presentation that it hasn't been easy to get where we have. We all have a lot of ups and downs. We will all make mistakes, but the most important thing is that we're not defined by them. And I think listening again to any of the seminars that have gone on throughout these last couple of weeks, I've heard on numerous occasions that as coaches, we constantly encourage players to make mistakes, and it's okay. If they won't make their first free throw, let's make it again. Don't be afraid to shoot a second time. If the play doesn't work the first time, we'll run it a second time. So a mistake, it's not forbidden for us to own it. And I think in relation to communication, that also builds massive bridges. Now, trust me, I don't mean for referees to go out and every time they blow the whistle and someone questions and say, oh, sorry, it was a mistake. But if it's an out of bounds, for example, we've seen it in a lot of games, the whole gym reacts. And I'm the only person that believed it was a blue ball. I will communicate, and I have no problem with my co-official when Magic goes, Emma, it actually went off blue. Absolutely. It's not forbidden to say, do you know what, that was my mistake, and we'll move on from it. The gestural communications, and again, this is something that FIBA have really, really clamped down on, waving the arms. And again, it's constant, you know, after every whistle, the arms will come up or they'll stay up or waving and so on and so forth. And again, that has to be dealt with because it's a form of disrespect. Hands on the heads, I myself have never come across it. But again, it's a case of, it's a human reaction. So, you know, they believe that they've been fouled, but yet it's actually gone on and there's no call made and the hands go on the head. Again, it's a quick hand on the head and come down. But what we don't want, and again, this comes from educating players from a very, very early stage, that it's not acceptable to walk around with your hands on your head and huff and puff and so on and so forth. And again, it runs into the next bit of repetition and continuous action and continuous behavior, because then it has to be dealt with, and especially if it's in a disrespectful manner. But again, I would re-emphasize that for us as referees, the onus is also on us not to be making gestural communication. So as a referee, if I'm in lead and there's a player telling me that, you know, his marker is constantly pushing him in the back, or he's using his knee to defend him and he's taking him off his stance, if I just stand there and shrug my shoulders and say, you know, what player is going to want that? And more to the point, what gives me the authority to just make a gesture back to them? I have to be as respectful with my gestures as I believe that coaches and players have also. And a big one for us is don't signal okay or it's all ball, because especially now, and especially when we have 3PO, I could be signaling it's all ball and my lovely co-official Magic could be coming in from a different angle, having seen a different contact and making the foul call. And that just, it's very difficult, and it breaks down the communication, it breaks down the trust from the players to me, or from the players to my co-official, or to anyone's co-official. So again, what I would emphasize on this relationship building is that whatever us as referees are preaching to coaches and players that we expect from, we as referees have to hold up the very same respect levels, the very same, you know, reasons behind why we do and what we do. And we cannot at any stage believe that we are above the game, above any player, or above any coach. And I think the most important element, no matter what is the game, and it's the development of the game, and the players and coaches are developing, and us as referees. But again, I believe it's educational, and it's coming from both sides. And as I said at the start, Paul may agree or disagree with, but I do definitely believe we're moving in the right direction. And I just think that tonight is a massive indicator of that. I think that might be the last slide.
Yeah, just a small thing to add it, Emma, for one of the first point on this slide, verbal communication and tone. Probably not too many coaches, players, or even spectators don't realize that we communicate even by the tone of our whistle. So we trying to use different tone for different situations when we're using our whistle during the game. So as a sample, like easy out the bounds, everybody knows where we're going. Easy foul, there's the tone is different, and this compared to different tone that we're using when there's the hard foul, unsportsmanlike foul, or controversial foul. That has to be, we communicate between the referees as well, but this is as well the communication between the spectators and the people around us, the tone of our whistle as well.
All right. So, couple of things.
Yeah.
A lot of questions that's coming now. And there's just on top of the hand behind head, there's a beautiful picture of me up in the IWA, by the way, with my hand behind my head after a call. So it has happened. I'm not going to lie. All right. I suppose I'm just talking from an experience more than anything else. And you alluded to it, Emma, during that. Do you think that the biggest controversy, or sorry, the biggest cause of conflict in terms of might be either a coach not understanding a rule, or vice versa, a referee not being able to articulate why they made a call? I mean, we've all seen many experiences where referees, for example, have called for reaching when the players never reach, and it should be a blocking foul. So therefore, from a coaching perspective, there's a lack of trust maybe that the referee may not know what they're actually calling. So it happens in both ways. So like obviously a coach may not know the 0-step rule properly or the half a line rule properly. And therefore, do you think those sort of situations cause conflict more than the actual calling of the violation or foul?
I couldn't agree with you more. I think you've really hit the nail on the head. And again, it works both ways. And I was actually only thinking about this throughout the week, because again, having come into some of the presentations, communication and the way we communicate with coaches and players is a massive thing. And we must have discussed it and had topics and talkers and presentations on it for the last, I'd say, 5 or 6 years, be it pre-conference, pre-season, but we still are not 100% on it. And there's a couple of reasons behind that. Firstly, if we look at experience, so if we go down, we'll say for referees starting out, so as you mentioned, they may not be fully able to articulate, and that could be for many reasons. So they've done their intro course and they're not 110% on the rules, not all of the rules, because they haven't come across them. And the other thing is they go in to referee a club game or a school game, and Paul Kelleher comes in with his second years, and straight away the referee is, he's in awe, he's seen him on the telly, he's refereed cup finals, he's refereed in the top league, you know, just saying. But again, straight away, that referee knows that you know more than him. So when you ask a question, straight away, his defenses, or their defense will be up, and it nearly might be a fear factor of they may not be able to answer, or as you said, articulate. So I do believe a lot of the situations arise from that. And then you go on to the aspect of some coaches not understanding the rules correctly, or again, referees as they progress may not be able to. But I was just going to finish up on just in relation to that, is it's like I nearly put it like the free throws. So as coaches, you emphasize this free throws. They're very important. They could come down to the wire. It could really make the difference between winning and losing a game. As referees, communication is a massive, massive part of our game. And as referees, we can really progress as long as we are really good at communicating and know when and why not to. And we could excel in it, but unfortunately, just some games it's not executed.
Yeah.
I think, Paul, just to add to your question, I think that it's important that most of the coaches, they're scouting the referees before the games, and they're fully aware who is coming on the court, who will be officiating. It's similar applied to the referees. We also, before each game, we are scouting, we're sharing the information from previous game, from difficult situation, we are sharing between each other, and we also scouting the coaches. So as you mentioned, there are the group, it's growing, which is very positive. I have to say it's growing each year. There's a group of coaches getting the knowledge, getting the rules. And from the referee perspective, personal, I have my own group of coaches, which is growing and is huge at the moment, which is very positive. So I know that those coaches, they know the rules. And if they ask me ask the question during the game, they could be positive, not positive, they could be the right question. It's not the question, just reaction of the situation, what's happened in the split second on the court, just because they think or they are in the position. Because the other situation as well is sometimes we are having loads of, especially when you are close to the coach, reaction about some contact, no call, but then situation is totally 10 meters away from the coach, player, whoever is questioning something. So wherever, for example, when I'm close to the coach is asking me, and I can answer the question because all the situation happened 20 meters away. So the question in my head is how, if I couldn't see it, how coach could see it. But then again, there's the group of, and it's growing, which is very positive, and that's challenging for us. This is really something which is really challenging for the referees as well, that the number of the coaches who knows the rules, who knows the play, and then if something happened, if they ask the question, the way they communicate, you know that you know the answer and you should know the answer to answer the question. And this is the question which is applied for the situation, what's happened, not the question for the reaction, which we think as well during the game, most of the cases.
I'm getting, sorry, no, I don't mean to be rude by looking at, I'm just getting messages in from WhatsApp, from phone to messages from
hope they're all good.
So I don't mean to be rude if I'm looking away when you're explaining. I am listening, so my apologies on that. Just something that's actually coming quite a bit, and I'm trying to figure out how to manage to say it in a manner where it's coming across in a good tone, but it's coming in quite rapidly in terms of dealing with personalities. And obviously there are coaches like me who possibly kind of like, as Tony Burke calls them, chippers and stuff like that. But how do you manage those personalities, or are you managing those personalities to not be, again, I'm trying to pick, I'm not asking this question, this is like, there's 4 here and there's 2 on the phone. So how do you manage to deal with that on a weekly basis where you may see somebody quite regularly, obviously with a small pool of officials?
Okay, so again, first of all, we as referees will go out, as Magic says, we're scouting teams and preparing for situations. You've said it yourself, I could come across the same coaches, 2 or 3 weeks on the trot, or might be on a week, off a week. But again, each game is a new game, new situation. So we go in with an open page, as they say, a blank sheet. But let's be honest, there are certain people that communicate with certain coaches in certain ways. I'm sure you've all managed to see it at this stage. I love the sound of my own voice, so I don't have a problem communicating. But I'll generally do it, maybe sometimes unbeknownst to other players. Like, so if I feel that a coach is maybe again getting to a certain stage where, you know, this now has to be dealt with, I could be in centre if it's 3PO, and it might be just a simple step back and asking them, you know, can we keep our arms down or can we keep them low? As you say, Paul, there's little chippers, so not everybody knows, so it's very hard to deal with. Do you know what I mean?
I've seen
So
a lot of
that's,
coaches who are chippers, and they're very, very good at hiding it. I'm
yeah.
just not very good at hiding it. So that's the difference.
You know, so
Right.
so again, that's for us to be able to build on our game and our way of communicating, and to deal with it in a professional manner, but also in a manner that it's not perceived to be either one coach getting away with it and one coach not. As I said, it's about going into every game with a clean slate, but also I could communicate, say, I'll take yourself for example, I could communicate with you in a game this week very differently than I will communicate with you in a game next week. This week's game might be very just up and down. It may be, there's no controversy in it. So the need for, we'll say, you to be chipping, or even if you are chipping, it's not going to be having a massive effect. And internally, I can deal with that a lot better because the pressure is slightly different. I go to next week and it's a 1 point top of the table clash, and you begin to chip, but my focus has to be 125% today because of the matchups that are happening. So I'm also dealing with perhaps players chipping at each other, and then with you chipping at me, I will then perhaps have to deal with you earlier chipping and put a halt to it than I would in a different situation.
Very good assessment. Very good assessment.
I fully agree, and I think that Paul, as you mentioned, as a small family of basketball, we can call it, of that we are seeing our faces on the regular basis, and I think it's all to individuals, the way individual referees, coaches communicate. Like, you know, it's all as well for the referees. From the referee's perspective, is the professional.
Professionalism.
Yeah, sorry. And this is something again from my own perspective. I'm not English native speaker, so that's another challenge for me being on the court. That sometimes, you know, you have split second to answer the question, and as Emma mentioned already, the communication should be short. So that's another on top of my head that I need to communicate with different coaches, players, the way they understood me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm just going to go back on the last topic. Something came in, I missed it. What are the rules for when one team isn't directly in control of the ball, i.e. defensive team knock the ball loose and are chasing it down, trying to start transition? I'm assuming they didn't finish the question by saying that a foul happens in that scenario.
So we'll say it's a loose ball situation is what he's...
Team A is on offense, Team B is on defense. Team B knocks the ball out of Team A's hand, so now Team B essentially can get on offense, but they scuffle a loose ball around center circle, and let's say Team A guy or girl fouls Team B. I think that's around the transition fouling.
In that case, one of the criteria for the unsportsmanlike foul, and it was highlighted that the offensive team has to be in control of the ball. So in this situation, when we use the loose ball, the offensive team is still in control of the ball. So, right. So any foul and the contact, it's by both players chasing the ball. Am I correct?
Team A was on offense, but now the ball is tipped away. So by your definition, Team A still has control of the ball, and then makes the foul on B. So therefore, it's not an unsportsmanlike foul because A technically has control of the ball. Is that what you're saying?
No, well, what he would be saying is, if, for argument's sake, so B could be technically about to start transition. Is that what we're saying? So it's about to start transition. So firstly, all of the criteria apply, i.e. your hard foul, so on and so forth. It would also then apply if he has gained control of the dribble, as in he's picked it up, he's dribbling. So now, is that foul as you mentioned earlier on, a C3 transitional foul of just wanting to stop it. I know he's going to get it, and it's just no attempt to play the ball. Technically he's never established his legal guarding position, so those criteria in relation to C3 would still apply.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that when you're talking about team control doesn't end for one team until the other team gain control of the ball. So the loose ball situation, the criteria for the unsportsmanlike obviously would still apply. It's just that judgment of, is he the last man back, i.e. the
Contact,
C4, or is it a transitional foul of never had legal guarding position and he's actively chasing the player, as we mentioned before. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect. So 2 things here. Sorry, there's 3 things that I'm going to finish up on. We're on an hour and 29 minutes, so I want to try and finish up quickly. It's been a great, healthy debate, but 2 things here. 1, coming in, do you think having midweek games would help the improvement of referees, where they have more high-level games to improve upon, as opposed to waiting where they may be overly tired? I'm adding in the overly tired, that wasn't in the original question, but say, for example, they had 2 games in a weekend. Is it more beneficial to have a midweek Super League game and then a weekend Super League game to improve the standards of refereeing, or to get more consistency? Let's not use the word improve the standard, more consistency.
Do you know what, that's actually, it's a very, very good question. And again, depending on if you're talking about the extra tired, everybody like yourselves, the coaches, a lot of them have full-time jobs. So technically you could work, if it's a Wednesday night, say, you could work all day and you may then have to get into your car and travel. Now, obviously, geographically, it will be slightly, I presume that the closer referees will be doing the midweek games. But it would obviously give you a better opportunity to recover, as you say, mentally and physically. So in that respect, the answer would have to be yes from that aspect of it. And then in relation to the tiredness of the game on Saturday and the game of Sunday, you then have the full-time work aspect of it. So it's not that I'm not answering the question, but I think there will be both pros and cons of it. And initially the pros would be definitely the recovery time from a very, very intense Saturday night game, that may go into overtime, to then go out on a Sunday to referee, which could turn out to be a very intense game and possibly also go to overtime. Let's be honest, mentally, as fit as you can be, mentally that is going to take effect.
Yeah, of course.
So
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, fully agree what Josema mentioned. Yeah, that's we are, fortunately we are not professionals, and this applies to the coaches, players, and most of the players and referees as well. So as you probably yourself, we spending loads of time, and this is not about only traveling to the game on Saturday and Sunday, to getting to the gym, being on time, game, coming back home. This is all about scouting, preparation for the game, which is part of our process that we are, as a referees, we need to prepare for the game. So it's not that I'm going to go to work, finish at 5 o'clock, I'm going to jump to the car, go to the closest gym, and because my head will be still at work, secondly, will be still at home, what's going on at home, if everything is okay, and I cannot perform 100%.
More of a technical one. At National League level, what is the most difficult area of the game to officiate? Dribble penetration, or pick and roll, or other?
Very good question. Again,
what was the first one?
So dribble penetration, pick and roll offense, or is there an other aspect that's not been spoken about, which is the most difficult to officiate?
I would think on a personal level, Magic, on a personal level, we've said it earlier on, the game is constantly developing, it's constantly progressing. And the inside, which hasn't been mentioned in your tree there, the inside game, the physicality of the inside game, both men and women, is getting more competitive, it's getting more skillful, but it's also getting more physical. And that fine line between legal and illegal is an area of the game that I feel we may not be massively consistent in. So from week in, week out, it may or may not be perceived as inconsistently refereed. But I find, and a couple of officials that we've spoken to, we have also said that it is a difficult aspect of the game.
Okay.
That would be mine.
From my own perspective, Paul, it's as I mentioned already, we are, myself including, we are scouting the players. We are scouting, trying to get ready for the game. So if I know the players which are difficult, or from my own experience having the game previous week, 2 weeks ago, something was wrong in the paint, pick and roll was having difficult 50-50, loads of contact that I wasn't 100% sure. That's something for me, getting myself ready. I'm gonna focus on this one. But this is, as Emma mentioned, each game it's the new game really.
And different things like that. So, right. So yeah, because I mean, you mentioned scouting a couple of times. I mean, I spoke with you guys, I would say maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I was able to pinpoint everyone's go-to call really. So I mean, we do scout officials and what to call, because we need to tell our players what to stay away from if that's a call, you know. So going back to just something she just did there, Emma, and you mentioned about the physicality on the inside, and we spoke about terminology. Is it a situation where now, as coaches and referees, we should be talking the same? We should be having the same terminology? Because when you spoke a while ago about the physicality, all that was going through my head was legal guarding position, legal guarding position, legal guarding position, because that's how we should defend it, not about the physicality of the contact inside the key.
Yeah, again, it's absolutely something that we should be trying to, and again, it's about terminology. And as a referee, Magic said it earlier on, a lot of the time we can be actively speaking on the baseline in relation to physicality. So it could be 15, your arms too high, 15, keep your hands off. Poor 15's getting an awful time tonight. But you know, so we're constantly using that in our preventative. But then it's the fine line, and for argument's sake, we'll use the drop step. So it's one continuous movement. And the arm, it's one continuous movement, and it's used quite well. Or then we have some players that may make it a secondary movement. So we'll have the drop step and then the drop of the arm or the drop of the shoulder. And it's that fine line between the physicality. So you're talking about legal guarding position, which the player has gained. And then for us, we always say referee to defense. What has the defense done wrong in order to cause a foul? So in this situation, we're refereeing the defense. We're also aware of the physicality, because again, the game is getting more physical, but the defense is also getting more physical. So we talk about the two big inside players that are bumping, because again, they like to get that contact. So it's that fine line. So I think, yeah, the terminology.
I will say this, and I do think that over the years, I do think the referees have gotten far better at refereeing the defense rather than refereeing the offense. And I think that's an improvement. I have said this publicly, and I've said this to both of you, and I've said this to Paul Dempsey. I do think that we've gone a little bit too much the other way, and we haven't met the balance in between yet. And I think when we do get there, I think we're going to see a much better game. So that's just something, that's just a personal opinion, but it's not something that's definite either. So I'm going to finish up on these two. I'm going to go back to a question that happened earlier, and I deliberately left this till the end because it mixed with another question. And it goes back to your point about the poor tendencies and things like that, or the positive tendencies that are seen by referees. Is it worth our while? And I know it's been attempted, and for people to say it hasn't been attempted is incorrect. Is it worth our while to make it consistent now, where to this question, where players and coaches are educated on the rules? I actually read that wrong initially, but the players and coaches are educated, but the referees are also educated. I will add to this person's comment, and they meet before the season. But also when you have your review meeting for the tendencies after, say, 10 or 12 games, maybe another one, and then a post-season one. I'm all for it. I mean, I think it's been attempted once, didn't go very well. So I think that's where we have to manage it respectively, collectively. But is that something that you feel is worthwhile?
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. Again, because it's about developing, but it's about developing on both sides. for us as referees, we can learn everything, that we can watch clips, and we can, you know, we can do all that we can, but we can't referee a game without players and coaches. And for us to come together with players and coaches, it's only going to mean a future development of everybody's game. And you touched on earlier on, for some confrontation situations arise from a lack of understanding. And again, perhaps a referee, the way that they articulate or the way that they communicate. So if we're educating ourselves in the players and coaches and the different plays and so on and so forth, and also we might identify an aspect of the game that is not refereeing well, but yet the players and coaches may think that to get that aspect of the game has actually been refereed very well, and the outside 3-point shooter is never protected. So, you know, definitely, we could be doing loads of work in the background on an issue that actually, if we speak to the players and coaches, was never an issue. So yeah, that would be my answer.
Yeah, I'm fully agree, Paul, with what Emma just mentioned. I remember a couple of years back, I attended one of the clinic which was presented by the coaches. And as we already mentioned, that the basketball for the last couple of years changed the way players are playing, the way coaches are coaching the players to play, hugely changed. It's not the same basketball what we've seen 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And when I attend this clinic, there was a coach's presentation really showing how they, the one of the question that was raised, how they teach now players playing pick and roll, how they teach the players playing low post. And on the back of it, it was the question to the referees as well, how this is the way I'm teaching my players. Is it allowed or not? Is it the contact will be let it go? Which was the huge beneficial for all the group. I remember it was a couple of years back. And since that, it's really, I believe that we should have, okay, tonight we have a presentation that we are just talking about from 3 topics, but I think it would be really beneficial that there will be the presentation from the coach's perspective, or even the players.
Yeah.
The players will share the feedback.
That would be interesting.
I'd say you'd be asking a lot less questions.
All right, let's wrap this up, guys, because it's getting late and there's people dropping off. So I think it's they're telling us that we're going on too long. Listen, guys, I can't thank you enough for your presentation. I thought it was really good. It'd be great if we get this on the court, and we could do this on the court where we can actually go through some stuff. It'd be fantastic. But thank you very, very much. I think you've been absolutely amazing. And we'll see you guys on Thursday night. That's my daughter right there. She's telling me she wants to go to bed. So I'll do that. But yeah, so we'll see you on Thursday night. Mike Bree will finish it up for us. I want to thank everybody for tuning in again. You've been absolutely great. You've been really interactive, and it's been fantastic. Hope everybody's got something out of this, and I shall see you all. Guys, thanks a million. Let's see if we can.
Thanks again, Paul. Appreciate that.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.